When you hear the word caviar, naturally, only two images come to mind: black and red caviar. However, the question also arises, which one is better? In fact, both of these products are symbols of celebration, luxury, and exquisite taste. But despite their superficial similarities, they are incredibly different products, with differences ranging from their origins to even the way they are served. So today, I invite you to explore the differences between these two sea treasures, and why one costs as much as a small car, while the other can easily grace our everyday tables. So the most important distinction we must start with is, of course, the origin. Or more precisely, the fish that produces this caviar will now be discussed. This is where the biggest and most significant difference between these two products lies. I suggest we start by looking at the black one. Calves. It is the caviar of sturgeon fish, which live primarily in the Caspian and Black Seas. The most famous representatives of this kingdom are fish such as beluga, sturgeon, and sevruga. These fish have incredibly long lives, mature, and spawn very rarely. For example, beluga can live up to 100 years and only spawn at 18-20 years of age. Therefore, it is their slow production cycle, as well as the strict ban on wild fishing, that makes black caviar so rare and incredibly expensive. And here is red caviar. This is a completely different product because it is the caviar of fish from the salmon family. These include well-known fish such as chum salmon, pink salmon, sockeye salmon, and chinook salmon. These fish, unlike sturgeon, lay their eggs much more frequently, and their populations are more numerous. However, an important factor in its easy accessibility is the fact that their breeding is less complex. This is why red caviar remains more accessible and familiar to most people. It can easily grace sandwiches and pancakes on your table. Thus, we have established that black caviar is sturgeon caviar, and red caviar is salmon caviar. And this is the first, unbreakable rule in the world of delicacies. So now, understanding the origin, we can move on to the most interesting factor of their difference, for which we have gathered here, and it is the taste and texture are fresh. Here, the differences are literally felt on your tongue at first touch. If you try black caviar, you'll experience a very subtle, pure, nutty, and sometimes even creamy flavor, often described as the true taste of the sea, but without a strong, fishy smell. Each egg is very firm and should burst onto the tongue with a slight pop, leaving a long, oily aftertaste. This is the kind of delicacy that requires slow savoring and minimal dilution with other foods or drinks. Red caviar, on the other hand, has a brighter, richer, more distinctly fishy, and quite salty flavor. Its texture, although firm, is usually softer and less crispy than black caviar. Red caviar has a stronger, more dominant flavor that pairs well with butter and even sour cream. So, spread butter on bread and top it with this type of caviar. This will enhance its flavor even more, as it doesn't get lost among other ingredients. This is why black caviar is served neat, while red caviar is often used as a garnish. For comparison and greater clarity, the taste of black caviar can be described as a subtle and expensive perfume. The taste of red caviar, on the other hand, is like a bright and very strong aroma. Well, now that we already understand where they come from and how each of the species tastes, let's talk about what immediately catches the eye. Color, size, and battoir. Of course, the processing process that makes caviar a delicacy. Let's begin our comparison with expensive black caviar. Its color is not pure black, and herein lies one of the hallmarks of its incredible value. In fact, black caviar can have a whole spectrum of different shades, ranging from the deep, almost black color of the sevruga sturgeon and to dark brown or even golden gray in sturgeon. The most expensive and rare type of this variety is the famous Alma's caviar, which is the caviar of the albino beluga and has a light golden, almost transparent color. This means that the lighter the shade of black caviar, the more valuable and expensive it is as a rule. As for red caviar, its color varies from bright orange to deep red burgundy, and this in turn directly depends on the salmon species. For example, chum salmon caviar has a beautiful, rich amber color, while sockeye salmon caviar, it is smaller and bright red. Let's move on to the size of the eggs. This is another immediate and obvious difference dictated by the type of fish. In the world of delicacies, a simple rule applies that the larger the sturgeon egg, the more expensive it is. Beluga caviar is considered the largest in the world, as its eggs can reach 3.5 millimeters in diameter. They look like small, transparent pearls, and their size provides that oily, soft texture. But sturgeon caviar, it's already smaller than the previous one. But here's the Sevruga caviar. It's the smallest, but also the most flavorful, so don't discount it. As for red caviar, it also has its own size characteristics. For example, the largest caviar is considered to be that of the chum salmon. Because its eggs are bright and large, chefs love them because they're easy to work with and have a unique, rich flavor that's simply irreplaceable. The smallest caviar comes from pink and sockeye salmon. And finally, we move on to the main difference, which may be hidden from the view of the average buyer. And this is processing. In order for caviar to transform from a raw product into the desired delicacy, it must be salted. But this must be done very delicately. This is where the magical term called malosol comes into play. This is not a separate type of caviar, but a method of processing it, which means light salting. That is, our caviar after this process contains a minimal amount of salt, and it is worth noting that the most expensive black caviar is always processed using this technology to preserve its natural, delicate flavor, which should not be interrupted by an enormous amount of salt. Red caviar is also often sold using the malosol technology, but due to its stronger and more pronounced flavor, it tolerates salt better than delicate black caviar. So this process is not very common on red caviar, since the caviar itself is already quite salty. However, it is worth noting that in both cases, the caviar is not only salted, but also very carefully separated from the membranes. This process is called a sampler, is a special grate that helps gently clean caviar without damaging its fragile shell. So, when you see perfect whole eggs in the finished product, know that this is all the result not only of nature, but also of the very careful manual labor of the person who does this. Serving caviar is a whole ritual, and here again, the fundamental difference between black and red caviar becomes apparent. Black caviar is the queen of caviar, requiring minimal accompaniment. It is often served chilled, often on a bed of crushed ice, and should never be served with metal utensils. This is because metal can impart an unpleasant flavor to the delicate caviar. Special spoons made of mother of pearl, bone, or even gold are used for black caviar. This caviar pairs best with the simplest fresh ingredients, such as thin ones, pancakes, neutral unsalted toast, or, at a pinch, a little low-fat sour cream. The goal of this serving is to allow the clean, buttery flavor of the caviar to dominate. As for drinks, the best ones to serve with it are chilled vodka or very dry champagne. They are ideal candidates for this dish because their neutral flavor or high acidity cleanses the palate perfectly, preparing it for the next portion of the delicacy, red caviar. Red caviar, on the other hand, is a more affordable and versatile delicacy. While it should also be served chilled, it thrives in more complex combinations. It's often mixed with butter to create a caviar cream, served on tartlets, used to garnish salads, or even served with egg dishes. Red caviar has a stronger, more persistent flavor that doesn't get lost among other ingredients. A wider range of beverages can also be paired with red caviar, greatly simplifying the selection of your offerings at an event. Thus, we see that black caviar is best enjoyed on its own or with minimal food and beverage accompaniments for a full flavor experience, while red caviar reveals its flavor best when paired with other ingredients. So, that's it. We've discussed taste and presentation, but it's important to understand that both caviar types are also incredibly healthy, although there are slight differences. Both black and red caviar are true superfoods, a concentrated source of easily digestible protein, which is important for cell building, as well as omega-3 fatty acids, which are beneficial for the heart, blood vessels, and even the brain. Speaking of differences, black caviar often contains slightly more fat, and therefore calories due to its oily texture, making it more filling and nutritious. Red caviar is also rich in protein and omega-3s, but it may have higher concentrations of certain vitamins, such as vitamin A and D. But taken as a whole, both are truly an important source of nutrients that come to us from the ocean and can greatly benefit your health. And finally, we will look at the most important practical point, and that is storage. Here you'll see again how capricious black caviar is compared to red. Indeed, black caviar is incredibly temperature sensitive. It should be stored strictly between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius. It often requires a special compartment in the refrigerator for safe storage. But if the temperature is higher, its delicate texture will quickly spoil. Furthermore, after opening a can, black caviar should be eaten within 2 to 3 days. Its delicate flavor and high cost prevent it from being stored for long. But red caviar. Black caviar, on the other hand, is much more patient. Thanks to its thicker shell and higher salt content, it tolerates temperature fluctuations better, although it should, of course, be refrigerated and can stay fresh in an opened jar for a little longer, usually no more than a week. Therefore, if you're buying caviar for a large crowd where it will be consumed quickly, any caviar will do. But if you plan to prolong the enjoyment, or if your refrigerator doesn't support ultra-low temperatures, you should be especially careful with black caviar and carefully and thoroughly research all the information about this product before purchasing. We've already discussed its origins, but did you know that in ancient times, black caviar wasn't always the most expensive delicacy? Indeed, historically, in certain coastal regions where sturgeon was abundant, caviar was sometimes considered an easily obtainable food, and sometimes even a byproduct. However, with advances in technology, transportation, and, most importantly, increased demand among the aristocracy, its status began to change dramatically. Black caviar became a symbol of the royal table and imperial luxury. Today, the difference in popularity and price between red and black caviar is due not simply to taste, but to strict international regulations. Because wild sturgeon are endangered, international trade in wild black caviar has been severely limited or completely banned by a special convention called CITES. This has led to almost all legal black caviar today coming from aqua farms, where sturgeon farming takes decades and requires colossal investments. Meanwhile, salmon, which produce red caviar, continue to spawn actively, and their catch and farming remain more widespread and accessible. It is this global market mechanism, based on the non-renewability of natural resources, that has secured black caviar its unique, astronomical price tag and status as an absolute luxury, while red caviar remains a symbol of celebration, affordable to most. That's why black caviar isn't just food, it's a kind of financial investment, while red caviar is our beloved traditional delicacy. Finally, it's worth mentioning humanity's struggle to preserve black caviar. Historically, sturgeon populations have been threatened due to their long life cycles and overfishing. This is why aquaculture, or sturgeon farming, has exploded in recent decades. Today, most of the black caviar you see on shelves comes from such farms. This has not only saved sturgeon from extinction, but also made black caviar somewhat more accessible, though it remains a luxury item. Red caviar also relies heavily on farming, but its population is much easier and faster to restore. Thus, the great battle between black and red caviar is a battle between exquisite rarity and festive affordability. Black caviar is the pinnacle of the gastronomic pyramid, requiring ceremony, while red caviar is a vibrant, universal joy that we can indulge in more often. Each is magnificent in its own way, and both are symbols of global culinary tradition. The choice, as always, is yours. What do you need today? Sophistication and luxury, or a burst of rich, vibrant flavor?